I used to think cemeteries were just another part of the landscape, no different from parks or courtyards, except for the names carved in stone. That was before I moved to Bordeaux and found myself face to face with a place that changed the way I see empty spaces forever. It started with a long walk on a grey November afternoon. I had just settled into my new apartment near the Jardin Public, and the overcast skies and bare trees matched the kind of melancholy that always seems to settle in after a move. I didn't have many friends in the city yet, so I spent my weekends wandering the streets, getting to know the place like a stranger studying a map. That's how I ended up at Cimetière de la Chartreuse. The cemetery isn't hidden away or tucked behind forgotten corners like some of the older graveyards I'd visited in other towns. Instead, it sits right there off Rue François de Sourdis, behind tall, solemn stone walls. From the outside, it's easy to miss, another quiet border to the flow of the city. But once you step inside, you realise just how vast it is. The entrance is framed by two gate pillars, each weathered by time and speckled with moss. I remember how cold the air felt when I crossed into the grounds. Not the sharp bite of winter cold, but something else. An absence. A quiet chill that seemed too heavy for the season. The paths twisted through an intricate grid of tombs and crypts, each one different from the last. Some were grand, almost proud in their architecture, standing like miniature cathedrals with spires and stained glass windows that caught what little sunlight the day offered. Others were plain, reduced to slabs of stone barely held upright by earth and time. Names stretched across centuries, entire families laid to rest side by side, some remembered by polished marble and flowers, others left to fade. What struck me most was the silence. Even with the tram line nearby and the hum of Bordeaux life just beyond the walls, the cemetery felt severed from the world. I could see the rooftops, but the sounds never reached me. It was as if the stones and statues formed a kind of barrier against the living, a boundary that couldn't be crossed. I walked for hours, following no real path, just letting my feet guide me deeper. As I wandered, I became aware of how the graves changed. The newer ones, well kept and decorated, gave way to older, forgotten plots. Cracked headstones leaned at uneasy angles, and iron railings, once ornate, were reduced to rusted skeletons. Ivy clung to statues of angels, their faces worn smooth, their wings chipped and broken. I found myself drawn toward the family vaults, large stone boxes that lined the outer walls. Each one stood like a sealed chamber, names and dates carved in stiff, formal script. Some had been built in the 1800s, and their doors were heavy iron or thick wood, long since rusted shut. One in particular stood out. The vault was tucked in a shadowed corner beneath a cluster of bare plane trees. The family name had been worn away, and the door, once black iron, was stained orange with rust. The air there was different, heavier, and the temperature seemed to drop noticeably. A faint scent of damp earth and old stone clung to the spot, as though the vault had absorbed centuries of rain and rot. I lingered there longer than I should have, studying the door and the dark gap at its edges where the metal had warped over time. There were no signs of visitors, no flowers, no candles, nothing. The longer I stared, the more aware I became of the silence pressing in from all sides. Even the distant crows had gone quiet. The feeling crept over me slowly, like the gradual numbness of a limb fallen asleep. The sensation that I wasn't alone. I turned to scan the narrow path behind me, half expecting to see someone else wandering the graves. But there was nothing, no one. Just the dense, patient stillness of the cemetery. The sky had begun to darken by the time I left, the sun setting behind the thick clouds without much ceremony. The walk home felt longer than the walk there, and even after I stepped through the door of my apartment, the cold clung to me like damp clothes. I brushed it off, convinced it was just the grey weather weighing on my mood. That night, I woke to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't loud, more of a dull, irregular thud, as if something heavy was being moved, but at a distance. The room was cold, the kind of cold that sinks deep into your bones even under blankets. I sat up, heart thudding in rhythm with the noise, but the moment I turned on the lamp, the sound stopped. The room looked perfectly normal, but the air still felt wrong, heavy and damp, like the corner of the cemetery where the vault had stood. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I found small things out of place. My coat, which I'd hung neatly on the hook by the door, was lying crumpled on the floor. A shallow smear of dirt stained the fabric, as if it had been dragged through soil. My boots were damp on the inside, though I hadn't worn them since the walk. In the days that followed, the disturbances grew bolder. My keys would vanish, only to reappear in impossible places, inside drawers I hadn't opened, or balanced on top of closed doors. The smell of earth and stone would drift through the apartment at odd hours, strongest just before dawn. My phone and laptop, fully charged before I slept, would be dead by morning, the batteries drained as if something unseen had used them. But the worst came one night at 3:07 a.m., the same minute I'd woken each night since visiting the cemetery. I woke shivering, the air colder than it had any right to be. My breath formed faint clouds in the dim light of the street lamp bleeding through the window. At the foot of my bed, the shape of my coat stood upright, sleeves hanging limp, as though something invisible was wearing it. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure stood there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds, and then collapsed onto the floor, as if the force holding it upright had simply let go. When I finally found the strength to switch on the light, the coat lay in a crumpled heap, damp with that same faint smell of soil. I left Bordeaux 3 weeks later, packed everything into the back of a rented van, and drove until the city was nothing but lights on the horizon. I never returned to La Chartreuse. I've seen pictures since, and the place looks as peaceful and well kept as ever. Quiet gravel paths, tidy rows of headstones, angel statues watching over the dead. But I know what I felt there, and I know that sometimes the dead don't stay behind their stones. Sometimes they follow you, even if only for a little while. And even now, years later, on cold, quiet nights when the world falls silent, I still wake at 3:07 a.m., heart pounding, breath fogging in the dark. Some places leave a mark. You can't wash off.